all of my sons, for Ali's sons, all of my sons, for Ali's sons. I tell my Lord whenever to him I pray. I tell my Lord whenever to him I pray. I am the mother who gave her sons away. I am the mother who gave her sons away. I'm a mother who has a pride, and what a pride. I'm the mother who has a pride, and what a pride. I'm the lioness who gave away all her pride. In the love of Muhammad daily I'd abide. In the love of Muhammad daily I'd abide. I gave everything, and in my Lord I relied. I gave everything, and in my Lord I relied. I had a voice like Ali's battle cry cried. With my 4 children's lives, Yazid rule I defied. I shook his throne with every sign. I shook his throne with every sign. It is the pride that lives with me every day. I am the mother who gave her sons away. How many doors God opens when one door opens? I married Ali and raised for him 4 lions. Each one holds each other's back and holds their burdens. And in the love of Hussein, their bond it strengthens. And in the love of Hussein, their bond it strengthens. They are all but presents to the Prince of Heavens. They are all but presents to the Prince of Heavens. And I'd give them if they were 4 or were thousands. And I'd give them if they were 4 or if they're thousands. Since they would crawl, since they would crawl, I gave them all. I did not allow a single one to stay. I am the mother who gave her sons away. I gave birth to each son, and beside each cradle I gave birth to each son, and beside each cradle I'd sing them lullabies, and each son I'd cradle. I'd sing them lullabies, and each son I'd cradle. In each lullaby a lesson to them I tell. In each lullaby a lesson to them I tell. You are all mortal, but Hussein is immortal. You are all mortal, but Hussein is immortal. Do not ever let him from his sorrow tremble. When he draws his sword, in front of him assemble. When he draws his sword, in front of him assemble. His sorrows mend, his life defend, his sorrows mend, his life defend. I tell my children when in my arms they play, I am the mother who gave her sons away. I am the mother who gave her sons away. I tell my Lord, you've given me such an honor. I sacrifice so Hussein can live forever. And I make a promise to you, O Creator. If any serve Hussein, their names I'll remember. I tell my Lord, you've given me such an honor. I sacrifice so Hussein can live forever. And I make Hussein a and I make a promise to my Creator. If any serve Hussein, their names I'll remember. If any serve Hussein, their names I'll remember. If they ask me for a wish, then I shall answer. To every lover of Hussein, I'm a mother. To every lover of Hussein, I'm a mother. If they love him, if they love him, they're my children. I will rescue them if in their grief they swear. I am the mother who gave her sons away. I am the mother who gave her sons away.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعظم الله وأجرنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين. Our dearest viewers, we send our condolences to you and of course to our awaited Saviour. May Allah hasten his reappearance, and we welcome you to another session which I see to be the majlis after the majlis for those of you in London, and the majlis before the majlis for those of you in the US and behind us slightly. And we welcome you to another session where, as you've just heard, we are using the medium of poetry, the medium of recitations and eulogies for us to connect to our Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, to take us forward to their journey and their message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they came to portray. And as you've probably guessed from that beautiful recitation by Mulla Ali, and I was tempted to pick out one line, and then there was another line, then there was another line, and AlBaneen, may she be, I think, parts of it, the one who is our mother, for we love Hussein. May she remember us because she remembers those who love Hussein and serves Hussein, and she is the mother that gave her children away. It's a story and a lady that I think when you get linked with her for the first time, you just can never ever let go.
Absolutely. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers of Imam Hussein TV, and welcome to another show of Verses of Love, as Hajj Sadiq was mentioning. And essentially, I think there's one thing that we repeat every single year about AlBaneen, which really underpins and underlines who she was as a person who gave not just her life, but everything that she had for the sake of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And that's essentially the day after the marriage to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And we know the history in terms of Imam Ali alayhi salam asking his brother to search for a woman whose ancestors were known for bravery and courage. So we know that story, but essentially one of the main things that really underlines who she was as a person, on the day after their marriage, Imam Ali alayhi salam calls her, Fatima, can you come to me? And then that's the day that everything changed for her, because she said, you know, if with all due respect, and I love Imam al-Hussein and Imam Hassan, but I don't want their grief to be because of me.
Ahsant.
So please do not call me Fatima.
Ahsant.
And that was the start. And not only that, but not just to not call me Fatima, but I will call them masters.
Allah.
Sayyidati. I will call them masters. And that actually, that tarbiyah, that upbringing was then given to Abu al-Fadl Abbas, who didn't call his brother by the name of brother or akhi, and it was always Sayyidi.
It's something that I always reflect on, and I say this whenever I'm in a majlis of AlBaneen, salamullah alayha. May we be granted with more of her majalis, inshallah. And I always say this point, which is, many of us want to be khuddam of Ahlul Bayt, servants of Ahlul Bayt, and we always say we'll give up time, sleep, money, effort, food, this, that and the other. They're all things that you can part with, right? They're all things you can part with. There's something that I think just shows the sincerity of that service, which many of us are like, why would you want to take my name away? I would never give up my name for some reason. If I've reverted to a faith, maybe, but why would I ever give up my name? And such was the servitude. As you said, I don't want to bring any sadness towards these two masters of mine. And I don't know, she's a lady who I myself, from a personal reflection, was brought up with this notion that my mother gave me, which was Abu Fadhil is, you know, the one you call for help, etc., etc. And I didn't really know about his mother until obviously you get a bit older and you start hearing another name, like, oh, who's AlBaneen? Oh, that's Abu Fadhil's. Oh wow, what's she going to be like?
Yeah.
And wow, then you hear it's not just one son, it's four, and what a lady.
There's many other lessons as well. It's not just a sacrifice, but actually her position, and due to the sacrifices that she made, her position to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's many case studies, I'm pretty sure that you know within your family, I know within my family, the stories that you hear of people being, their hajats being granted just by calling on the name of AlBaneen alayhi salam. So be it an oath to make a majlis or create a majlis in her name, or for example 100 salawat, for example, is
reciting a Fatiha when you do something.
Fatiha when you do something, absolutely. So there's it's because of her position and her sacrifice, and that's I guess a lesson in this day, because we talk about reform and using Muharram to reform yourself, in the sense that if I get closer to the Ahlul Bayt as much as I can, using these personalities as an example, then hopefully my hajat, those needs, will all kind of fall into place. Inshallah. If I can use them as a wasila.
What a lady.
Yeah. And so yeah, carrying on the same theme as inshallah. As always, we are delighted actually and quite honored to have Haji Sadiq research the wisdom behind Ziyarat Ashura. And so over the last couple of nights and for the remaining nights on Verses of Love, we'll be taking a bit of an insight into Ziyarat Ashura. So tonight, inshallah, you'll be sharing us with...
Absolutely, and as always,
we've only reached, what, the first line or two, I think?
If that, yeah. We're getting to... we've just gone beyond the family stage now, if you like. Yeah. So we've now reached Wal-Witr al-Mawtur. And of course, disclaimer, this is all from Shaykh Al-Fan, who has compiled many of the sharhs in Farsi and Arabic for us to easily digest in English. If you would like to have access to his book, al-islam.org, and you can read on from there, and anything that I misrepresent is on my shoulders, but any good you get is from him and his research. So Wal-Witr al-Mawtur, and viewers, I'd ask you to open your phone, jump to Ziyarat Ashura wherever you have it in your phone, and check the translation of that line, because you'll see there's actually varying translations that people actually have of this. For example, some would call it, some would translate it as the one who's been unavenged thus far. Others may say the one who is rendered solitary, alone. Others will say the martyr whose near ones have been killed but their blood has not been avenged. And we're going to look at some of those, but the first one we'll start with is one that perhaps doesn't usually come up, which is the exceptionally unique. Wal-Witr al-Mawtur, the exceptionally unique. So where does it come from? Al-Witr, in Arabic, al-Fard is single, i.e. man la thaniya, the one that doesn't have a second thing to it, right? And al-Mawtur is an adjective of al-Witr. And when put together, it actually means the same, but it's brought as emphasis. So we're really emphasizing this oneness, this it hasn't got a second to it kind of notion, this individualistic, individual notion. And some scholars come forward and actually say, and they have the opinion, that this al-Witr is referring to the Imam's unique spiritual status, which the Holy Prophet and the Imam alayhim salam, through to our final Imam, also possess. Hence, in relation to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and al-Imam al-Ma'soom, an infallible leader specifically, like Imam Hussein, therefore occupies a very unique station. And this is why we call him al-Witr al-Mawtur. And we have two of our Imam alayhi salam describe this in terms of the station of the Imam alayhi salam. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, says, لا يجود له مثيل ولا يقوم له بديل. He is peerless, referring to the Imam. He is peerless, no substitute can represent him. So complete uniqueness. And also Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam describes the quality of an infallible Imam by saying, Al-Imam wahid, dahr la yudani ahad. The Imam is unique in his time. None can come close to him in rank. And as a result, some Mufassirin then come forward and say, therefore, Al-Witr, the title of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Imam Hussein is a manifestation of this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique, is one, ultimately comes back to Tawheed, he cannot be compared, he's not begotten or begotten, etc. And Imam Hussein is a manifestation of this individual who cannot be compared to another. Their Imma cannot be compared to others. They are, as we've just seen in the narrations, they are specific to their time and in their own pedestal. And the Prophet, after speaking about the divine names, he also comes forward and says, Innahu afwan. He says, surely he, Allah, is unique and he loves the unique. So now we see the relationship that Allah is unique, but also his passion and love for the unique one, i.e. the Imma, is also there to be found. So it's something that I don't think we immediately click in this ziyarah. Again, we started by saying how his status is such because of his actions, etc. But now we actually have a confirmation into this ziyarah where we're saying, now I'm addressing you, the unique one.
What's the actual lines before Witr al-Mawtur? Is there a context to it, or is it just?
It's immediately from Thar Allah.
Okay.
So we have the Assalamu alaykum Aba Abdullah, followed by the family members, grandson, son, followed by Ya Thar Allah, and then Wal Witr al-Mawtur.
Assalamu alaykum Ya Thar Allah, Wal Witr. So why wouldn't it have its own Assalamu alayka in a way?
I have no idea. No, it's something to ponder on. We can ask, inshallah. Yeah. No, but it's an interesting point.
Yeah. Because as you mentioned, it's a uniqueness. So I don't know. It's probably for the Mufassirin, but having Witr al-Mawtur because of its uniqueness, having it maybe as its own line. Assalamu alayka.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think the amazing thing is that when you start reading about this kind of stuff, you then want to buy the next book to read the other guys, other Mufassirs' interpretation. You just go and you can see how it continues.
Absolutely.
So inshallah. So this is, I think, again, the notion of it is this uniqueness that he holds and all of the Imma hold, but specifically in this case for the Ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Now, some scholars then go forward, and this I found really interesting because we usually hear, and I struggled to understand this, and this started to bring a little bit of light to it, which is where people say, is Imam Hussein alayhi salam on a higher pedestal than the other Imma? Because we say when you're under the golden dome of Imam Hussein, there's something unique about that dua. There's something unique about the station that he holds. And I always thought, well, how can that be if the Imam alayhi salam are like one and the other? And this really answered it. So some Mufassirin come and say, fine, he's unique, but he's even unique amongst the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, let's, this is an interesting point. So what is this uniqueness? So they say he occupies a certain level of uniqueness even amongst the Ahlul Bayt because of the mission he was granted with by Allah and the fact he had the permission to then carry it out. And by doing so, not many other of the Imam alayhi salam, you could argue, had such an opportunity. However, not to be confused, had they had the opportunity, they too would have taken the similar steps. However, Imam Hussein, for a given time, a given place, and in Allah's infinite wisdom, presented him with that opportunity. And therefore, he was able to carry out those tasks. And we see this in Quran, in Surah Al-Ahqaf, verse 19, where Allah says, and for all are degrees according to what they did. So because Imam Hussein actually carried that out and had the opportunity, Allah will reward him aptly for doing such. And the verse goes on, and that he may pay them back fully their deeds, and they shall not be wronged. And again, just to back this up, which I think is quite an interesting thing, the Prophet says to his wife Salma that Allah revealed unto me that verily he, Al-Hussein alayhi salam, has a station which none of the creation would attain. And there's another narration that tells us that when Imam al-Hussein, before his departure from Medina, he sees the Prophet in his dream, where the Prophet addresses him saying, and indeed you have stations in the paradise that you shall not attain save with martyrdom. So we really start to see this evidence that he is in such a maqam, such a lofty status, that when we say wal-witr al-mawtur, we're identifying him as a man who has been raised through the ranks by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just finally, briefly, and that is that sometimes this word witr is translated to alone as well. And mawtur is sometimes referred to as the one who is slain. And therefore what we have is a man who is alone, but is also slain. Now, his companions and his family members were also at some point alone and slain. However, the gharib or the ghurba for the imam is uncomparable. Every imam that lived, you could argue, is gharib al-ghurba. Why? Because at that given time, they are the only imam at that moment. They're the only one of that proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you could say. And therefore, for Imam al-Hussein to be alone physically without his family members and companions, to be about to be laid to his death, but also at that moment he's still the imam, and the imam feels a sense of loneliness whenever they are around, and therefore also referred to in some ziyarat as gharib al-ghuraba as well. So just 3 points inshallah on wal-witr al-mawtur.
Fantastic. And just before we go on to the next kind of stage of the program, of course, this program is dedicated to lamentations, eulogies, recitations, as well as some wisdom from Ziyarat Ashura, which is associated with Muharram predominantly. And so we ask you, dear viewers, to reach out to us on our social media platforms, specifically on Twitter, using the hashtag verses of love, all one word, verses of love, and put in your poetry. We're more than happy to be able to recite that on live as well. So please do reach out to us through those means.
Absolutely. And I think at this point we'll begin by introducing our guests, Brother Sajjid, Alidina, who will grace us with a few words about these holy days. We welcome him with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
What fire is this? What fire is this that when it circles his grave, waves of heartache are washed away? A fire that engulfs all that stood between him and death when a lifeless body he lay. Lit was a flame, no smoke without fire. A blaze that grew and will never tame. Not all fires burn, the flame for Hussein saves, always stays, never sways. We mourn as one for a back torn, a man worn. Our tears adorn the cheeks that were created dry, and for wetness they yearn. Created from earth by God's will and by his mercy, one who mourns and the one he mourns stares at him from above, powering and tall, unjust power. And in the mourner a fire is born. I'm here, O Hussein, in your blood-soaked palms my soul rests. By he who gave me life, on the one who holds my death I've sworn. By Hussein we fall like rain, on oppression's plains we attain heaven. For what else is heaven but mourning Hussein? Rivers running one end to the other, where are you going in such a hurry? Patterns formed by your meanders, the curves and bends, do they tell a story? What is your destination? Your water runs away, but its goal is the ocean. From who do you run when your end is your beginning? The son of Ali, you rush and gush, cries hush, waters blush when the lips of Hussein's brother they see. Lips that would beg their master to say one name. Lips that would beg their master to say one name, but Abbas doesn't listen to anything except that name. His lips could bleed blood until they turn black. Abbas doesn't play by that game. The pricks that scratch at his dry throat, they're beautiful when he's serving Hussein. By water he knelt, cold it felt, sweet it smelt. It'll melt in the heat of Karbala before touching the lips of the flag bearer. Flags fly high, move with the wind, follow its direction. Signifies a flag the core of a community or a nation, and on a pole stands the flag. But with a light breeze it wavers. In front of 30,000 men, unmoved, untouched, stands Abbas. Flags twirl and swirl, young girls cry pearls of tears as his flag falls to the ground and breaks a back that would rest on Muhammad's lap. So it's time, don't sit comfortable, for Hussein had no comfort. Don't sit straight and proud, for his back was bent and hurt. And don't be shy to cry loud. In Zahra's list, your name enlist. And don't quench your thirst. And don't quench your thirst, for thirsty from this world he would depart. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Wa ali Muhammad wa ajma'in. Inshallah, in Sayyida Zahra's list. Ahsantum Sajjid, beautiful. And I think her list, AlBaneen's list, all of the mothers of Karbala, all of their lists, inshallah.
Inshallah, definitely. And AlBaneen alayhi salam, there's, as we mentioned, there's many things that we can talk about her. Her sacrifice, her nobility, her loyalty. One of the things that I was reading upon her life before the show is actually, when Abu Fadhil was born, that was also quite a significant moment for her, because I'm not sure entirely when she realized that her children are going to be sacrificed for Imam Hussein. Of course, she had no question about it, but it's quite interesting because when Abu Fadhil was born, he was, AlBaneen was happy to take Abu Fadhil wrapped in clothes and stuff. And so when she gave him to Imam Ali just immediately took the son, unwrapped the clothing slightly, and then took the arm or the little hand of the little baby and started to kiss it. And that's when he started to weep. And AlBaneen was a bit confused because it's supposed to be a happy occasion in the sense that, it's a new child that's born into the earth. And she asks, is there anything wrong with the hands of Abu Fadhil? She goes, AlBaneen says, no, there's nothing wrong with Abu Fadhil Abbas's arms. But these arms are going to be sacrificed for my son, or for our son Hussein. And that's the moment when she realized, okay, so everything that I do, everything that I give for Abu Fadhil Abbas is supposed to be a sacrifice for Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
That conviction of a mother at that point to still stick to task is something else. Because I think you see a mother's bond with their child, and any harm that comes to them, you see them rush before anyone.
It's natural instinct. It's natural instinct to be protective of your children. This and for her to go totally against what is deemed to be natural must have been, I don't know,
intellectual prowess. It has to be in spiritual faith. It's exceptional.
Yes, that's exactly it.
It's exceptional.
It's spiritual because there's an absolute dedication and submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, she knows and understands that emotions are emotions, but also I have a mission here, and the mission is to be able to provide everything that I can for these children so that they can sacrifice their lives for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And that's why in the Masa'ib we say, she even says at the end of her, or close towards the end of her life, she says, لا تدعوني ويكي AlBaneen. She says, don't call me AlBaneen, for I am not essentially the, لا تدعوني ويكي AlBaneen تذكريني باليوث العرين. So she says, don't mention that I am AlBaneen, because that will remind me of my children who were sacrificed in Karbala. And so, following on from this dedication, as she found out and she was realizing that Imam al-Hussein, his mission had started, she took Abu Fadl Abbas to one side, AlBaneen. When she took Abu Fadl Abbas to one side, she says, come to me, son. And he comes, he says, yes, mother, with the utmost respect and nobility. She says, my son Abu Fadl al-Abbas, this is the time, everything that I have taught you up until now, this is the time to put everything into action. You're going to go onto a journey, and I want you to take care of two people, predominantly, but of course, you're the standard bearer, you're the flag bearer here. But you take care of two people. Number one, Imam al-Hussein, you become a brother, you become his back. And number two is Sayyida Zainab, alayhi salam. They are your masters. They are the children of my master Fatima Zahra. So one request from you, I want you to make me proud in front of Fatima Zahra on the Day of Judgment. I want to stand there proudly saying, my master, Ya Binta Rasulullah, I sacrificed all my boys for you, all of my children, and make sure that your brothers are sacrificed in the path of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. يا ابني أدري بيك بمروة وأدري بيك وأدري وريد ضلوك على حسين تتلوى. My son, I want you to sacrifice your limbs for Hussein. For Zainab is relying on your brotherhood. You'll satisfy Fatima, and with her satisfaction you'll please me. He responds, oh mother, do not worry, oh mother, do not worry, you can rely on me. I'll make sure my blood is spilt in Karbala, from the river to the camps. From the river to the camps. The family then leaves Medina. AlBaneen is there waiting. When will they come back? When will these family members come back? When is my beloved Hussein coming back? She doesn't hear the news until one day Imam Sajjid alayhi salam on the outskirts of Medina. He meets a poet by the name of Bishr. He says, Bishr, your father was a poet. Can you tell the people of Medina, which was previously known before the Prophet entered as Yathrib, go into Yathrib and tell them what happened to my father Hussein. Go to every single street, every single alley, and tell them to get out of the city, for my father Hussein was killed thirsty. And so Bishr comes screaming loudly. He says, Ya Ahla Yathrib la muqama lakum biha. O people of Medina, you must not stay in the city. What is the news, O Bishr? He goes from every street to every street until all of the people, they came out of their house. He said, I will tell you of the news next to the grave of Rasulullah. And so they all gather around the grave of Rasulullah. And then he repeated, Ya Ahla Yathrib la muqama lakum biha. قتل الحسين فأدمعي مدرار الجسم منه بكربلاء مضرج والرأس منه على القناة يدار. O people of Yathrib, get up and leave the city. Hussein has been killed in Karbala. His body fell under the horses of Banu Umayyah, while his head was on the spear, touring city by city. He said everyone broke into tears, crying out, Aywa Imama, Aywa Husseina. At this point, he saw in the distance an older lady approaching while she was carrying a child on her shoulders. I asked, Bishr says, they told me, Bishr, I asked, who is this lady coming towards me? And this is when they said, Bishr, be careful, for this is AlBaneen al-Arba'a. This is the mother of Al-Abbas and his brothers. Be careful how you deliver the news to her, Ya Bishr. He says, she came to me. She did not ask of any of her children. She said, Bishr, I heard you have news of my master Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He is my son. Is he back? Bishr says, I looked left and right. I didn't know how to tell her the news of her son Hussein. He says, Ya AlBaneen, your youngest son was killed in Karbala. Al-Baneen said, did I ask you about my youngest son? He then says, O Al-Baneen, your other youngest son, about your other son, the second youngest, he was also killed. May Allah grant you patience. عظم الله لك الأجر for your son who was killed in Karbala. Al-Baneen says, Bishr, did I ask you about my sons, for they are all sacrificed for Hussein? Tell me, is Hussein back? Is he okay? How is Sayyida Zainab? Then he says, Bishr, he says to her, Ya البنين عظم الله لك الأجر بمصاب أبي الفضل العباس. Even Abbas was killed in Karbala, Ya البنين. At that point, I saw her dropping the child from the shoulder. Who was the boy? I asked. They said, this is Fadhil, the son of Abil Fadl al-Abbas. At that moment she cried and said, Ya Bishr, لَقَدْ قَطَّعْتَنِي يَا قَلْبِي. You've broken my heart into pieces. May all my sons be sacrificed for Hussein. Tell me, is he back? O Shia of Abi Abdullah, عظم الله لكم الأجر بمصاب الحسين قتل شهيدا في كربلاء. Allah. And then she hears that Sayyida Zainab has now returned home. For this moment in time is the most heartbreaking. She hears that Sayyida Zainab has returned home. She wanted to come and send her aza to Sayyida Zainab, but when Sayyida Zainab came into the house, she saw the house was empty. She looks left, she looks right. This is where Ali al-Akbar would sit with me. This is where Qasim would talk to me. This is the mihrab of my brother Hussein. This is where he would pray. His musalla is still there. The house is dark and empty. The women of Bani Hashim are now grieving and lamenting and crying. And then Sayyida Zainab told her maid, don't let anyone come in, for we are in a state of grief. At that moment, there came a knock on the door. The maid came to the door. It was AlBaneen. She went back to Sayyida Zainab and said, Oh Sayyida, AlBaneen is at the door. What shall I do? Sayyida Zainab said, of course, let her in. She is part of our azab. She is part of our grieving. She is part of our lamenting. When they both saw each other, the first thing that AlBaneen would say to Sayyida Zainab, Aywa Husayna, Aywa Madluma. The response from Sayyida Zainab would be, Aywa Abbasa, Ya AlBaneen, you should have seen Abbas, what they did to him. AlBaneen said, did he do something wrong? Were there any shortcomings from Abil Fadl Abbas? No, Ya AlBaneen. They cut off his right arm. He was trying to bring back water to the camps and to the children. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. صلى على بسم الله.
Zahra's door, there is no shame. To beg at Zahra's door, there's no shame, it's an honor. Jibreel kneels by her feet, this queen of 14. And he's not the only angel to grace Ali's house, for after Zahra comes Fatima, AlBaneen. Only pure women could set foot in a house that's surrounded by a ring of God's protection. A house that began with Islam's bearer, Khadija. It all started with her conviction. The rest came from her and from Muhammad. For only perfection gives birth to perfection. So from her would be born our mistress Fatima. But if I spoke till I die, her value I couldn't mention. Sometimes I'd sit back from it all and ponder, how could such purity be tainted? I'd wonder, how could Khadija be left to die without a shroud? Was she allowed to thrive? Our history would be so clean. How could they be tortured for rejecting disbelief? From Fatima to Zahra to AlBaneen. Yet despite the best of all his efforts, Muhammad couldn't stop on his daughter the oppression. On the house of Ali rain armed men. On the house of Ali rain armed men. When upon it once rained revelation. Her door and her face both were struck. Her heart in flames, Ali in prostration. How many women fell as she fell? Who was left after her to carry this religion? Maybe she shed this thought and uttered a prayer, asking God to provide for Hussein a second mother. And there's no maybe when it comes to Fatima. When she asks God, nothing stands between. Responding to heaven's queen, God calls a soul and names her by his majesty, AlBaneen. God produced a light we now know to be Zahra, whose breath alone was his glorification. Her light lit the sun, removing all darkness. Her breathing would push planets into rotation. It was all for her, from first to last. For her was created every star, every ocean. And soon enough came the time for a moon to be carved. Soon enough came the time for a moon to be carved, but another Fatima was needed before its formation, and Zahra would welcome her, so 4 moons would appear. It's as if upon seeing them, God himself would shed a tear. 4 of her own, yet she only had 1 son. 4 of her own, yet she only had 1 son. Between Hussein and harm they stood, a screen. Nothing would pass them when they rose to defend, to protect Hussein, the son of AlBaneen. Beside Zahra, she placed together the pieces of our world. Right beside Zahra, she placed together the pieces of our world. To nurture servants of God was their only mission. And in this endeavor, they were together, just like in an ocean, the moon's reflection. Separated were these two by absolutely nothing. Equal were their actions, values, and position. It's only time that held them apart. When it comes to God's plan, neither of them question. And she'd raise a true servant when the time finally came. And she'd raise a true servant when the time finally came. For she understood a servant of God is a servant of Hussein. She raised 4 in that house and treated them all as one. But when Hussein was around, none of them would be seen. She'd teach them to fight to bring Hussein water and watch them proudly. With AlBaneen, she stood at the door of Hassan and Hussein. And on her day of joy, she swore her confession. God's verses flowed from her valiant tongue, a scholar, a teacher. And Zainab's new servant, only would she enter her husband's home. Once he agreed to her one and only condition, so he'd rename her AlBaneen, the mother, mother of Abbas, mother of submission. With footsteps destined to walk in the heavens, she'd arrive, and Hassan and Hussein would ask, is my mother alive? With the birth of Abbas, piety is born. With the birth of Abbas, piety is born. Ali hands him over. Let me paint for you this scene. A young Hussein cradles his new brother. A young Hussein cradles his new brother and holds them both in her embrace. AlBaneen, her status not one easy to achieve. In God's eyes, very few reach their position. And there was really just one reason for it all. Her loyalty to Zahra's family came without condition. She lived our dua when we pray for our master and claim our allegiance without question. She taught us to die for the sons of Ali, even though to die for her son is our ambition. She'd knock on death's door and beg for assistance. To be killed for my true son is the purpose of their existence. Loyalty itself would tire in her presence, as Ali with all his sorrow upon her heart would lean. So she'd comfort his children as if they were his own. So she'd comfort his children as if they were her own, and kiss Hussein's head with AlBaneen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa
محمد وآل محسن.
ای عشق اول و آخر من، ای مهربان تر از مادر من، یا واهب العطایا یا منتهی الرجایا یا دافع البلایا ارباب تشنه سر جدا خون بهایت خدا السلام علی ساکن کربلا یا
a hadith from Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi, as part of a longer hadith that he narrates, where he says, those who shed tears when Hussein alayhi salam is mentioned in front of them will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, even if their tears are as small as the wing of a fly. And Allah will not be pleased with any reward for them less than paradise. And when we hear recitations like the Masa'ib that you gave, Mulla Ali, and recitations like that, Sajjid, that you've just given, it gives everyone an opportunity who has even a slight bit of emotion within their heart, a slight bit of softness in their heart to grieve and mourn. There's a lot of emphasis on loyalty in there, no surprise. And a lot of comparison between AlBaneen and Mawlati Fatima Zahra. Just paint us a little bit more as to the thinking within that.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. To be honest with you, this is why I love writing poetry, and it's simply because to answer that question in plain words is very, very difficult. And sometimes people ask me, like, how long does it take you to write a poem, things like this. And to be honest with you, sometimes it takes me a very, very long time. And the reason is because everything I want to say about your question is a lot easier to say in a couplet. Sometimes, you know, there's clearly a relationship between loyalty and both of those women. But when it comes to obviously the Masa'ib that we've heard and the whole discussion and the whole night that is tonight, we know that the loyalty of AlBaneen salamullahi alayha is unmatched. And for me, and this is maybe a little bit personal, but for me it's her loyalty to Sayyid Zahra salamullahi alayha and her children.
We don't usually put it that way. We didn't even mention that in the intro. It's
so we obviously think, you know, it's her loyalty to Um AlBaneen, it's her loyalty to Aba Abdullah alayhi salam, but really that just stems for me from her loyalty to the Mistress of the Worlds.
And what's interesting about that is that she didn't really meet. I don't think she met Fatima Zahra.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know.
Because if she didn't, because she was saying that, you know, Fatima Zahra has passed away at this time, and, you know, don't call me by Fatima because I don't want my sons to grieve over her name. So, how much loyalty, as you mentioned, did you have to Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima Zahra, and therefore to Imam Hussein alayhi salam? So it's very fascinating. I actually love the fact that you used a lot of comparisons and a lot of imagery in your poetry. Could you? I guess it's quite difficult, but if you had to, if you could put it into words, what kind of inspires you to bring so much so much different pictures but into words. Because when listening to you, I feel like I go here and then you bring me to this place and to that place, and it's amazing as a journey. So I just want to know, in terms of the thought process behind that, how do you bring all of those different images together into words?
Alhamdulillah, it makes me happy. Is probably not the right word, but happy that that does that to you, because that's exactly the emotion that. Not only the emotion that I want you to have, but the emotion that I have when I'm writing the poem, right? I kind of go all over the place, right? I'm not sure where I want to end up and where I'm beginning, but what I know is there's a theme to the poem, and that theme is usually something to do with a concept of what I can relate to and comparing it to what I can't really relate to. And usually I can't relate to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that well, right? Whether it's AlBaneen alayhi salam or Fatima Zahra or any of the Aimma alayhim salam, who am I to sort of, and I'm sure we all feel the same way, who are we to kind of know where they're coming from and share the thoughts that they might have had and the emotions that they might have felt? Who are we, right? But we can connect to the moon that we see every night, right?
Okay.
We can connect to the ocean that we feel and we swim in, right? So almost trying to connect those feelings of looking at the sun or swimming in an ocean to sort of, we all know that the feeling of a nice sunny day or a swim in warm water, how that feels and how that makes us feel, and almost trying to connect that and make it slightly somber and slightly sorrowful and connect it to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. But at the end of the day, to be honest with you, look, the writers of these poems are none other than Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and I'm not just saying that. Yeah, there's no way that I could write anything like these poems. So
absolutely,
it's
beautiful.
It's just Ahlul Bayt.
It's beautiful. It's something that you mentioned there, where you say you kind of using similes or imagery that perhaps we're used to in day to day. The Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's maybe something that we pick up from there, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in a way to do that, because He describes the punishment of the next life or the reward of the next life, the sweetness in things that we can appreciate and understand and digest ourselves as typical people. But in this, as Ali mentioned, you kind of you go on a journey of multiple sections. Before you start writing, do you envisage, okay, I'm going to link up these 6, 7, 8 different concepts, or do you start with a couple and you just see it multiply? Yeah,
sometimes I have a sort of a vision for where I want to take the poem. Sometimes it's more, and I was actually watching one of your shows earlier, and Brother Nouri, who's a role model of mine, he explained that because he writes the chorus first, and yeah, sometimes I follow that kind of pattern. I write the central idea, and then the rest of the poem comes from that. And sometimes it's just these are 2 or 3 concepts that I have that I want to include in this poem. Let's see where it takes us. And I find sometimes that's how I write best, is just to begin, and with the help of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, it just comes. And subhanAllah, like, sometimes I think, I can think of 3 verses that I can just about, get on paper. How am I going to write the rest of this poem? Because 3 verses is not a good enough poem for me. And they just...
It just flies. The ink flies. May Allah keep that ink flowing from your pen, inshallah, and into your family's pens as well. And dear viewers, you've seen this evening's being an emotional evening, whilst we've commemorated one of all of our role models quite clearly in AlBaneen. You've understood and no doubt been reminded that her intercession is something that we all seek regularly. So as we conclude with the recitations from Mulla Ali, I request you to put the haja into your head, your desires into your head, and ask through her intercession so that she can take that towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But please, please, please do not forget the imminent return of your awaited Saviour, and of course all of those across the world who are in need of loyalty like hers to help their cause towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with that, we leave you with Mulla Ali Fadhil.
Remember her, she's the mother of Ashura, AlBaneen. Remember her, she's the mother of Ashura, AlBaneen. The first to cry and mourn from a servant born, AlBaneen, the first to cry and mourn, from a servant born, AlBaneen, AlBaneen. If your eyes have ever shed tears, whenever to you reappears the image of Ashura, the image of heads upon spears, the little girls drowned in their fears, and the morning of Zahra. And whenever Muharram nears, in every mosque a name appears, alongside every lover. When you mourn, it is she who hears. To mourning she gave all her years. This is Abbas's mother. This is Abbas's mother. When we're mourning and lamenting, by us crying, she's always been. In her chest, her heart torn, from a servant born, AlBaneen, the first to cry and mourn, from a servant born, AlBaneen, AlBaneen. She raised and gave away for lights. She raised and gave away for lights, a moon and stars that lit her nights. Not one by her would remain. Her pride writes and her soul recites. The flame of love in her ignites. May my sons for him be slain. Her patience, it had reached such sights. She did not care for her son's rights. Yet for Hussein her tears rain. On a little, on a title she set her sights, one that in her son's blood she writes. The first servant of Hussein, the first servant of Hussein. They promise a sacrifice, at what a price, like none have seen. To give her sons she'd sworn, from her servants are born. AlBaneen, the first to cry and mourn, from her servants are born. AlBaneen, AlBaneen. What hatred and what oppression. Her dome is by rubble hidden. No minarets and no gold, by her no commemoration. No servants, no tents are open, no mourning, no flags are held. It's because they fear her lesson. 1,000 years yet she glistens. Her power it is untold. Her power it is untold. Don't think with grief she's stricken. She'll give her grave like her children. So yearns Hussein's grave, the world. So yearns Hussein's grave, the world. 4 sons I gave, 4 sons I gave. Give me no grave. Karbala crave. Visit Hussein. 4 sons I gave. Give me no grave. Karbala crave. Visit Hussein. My Hussein I adorn. From her servants are born البنين البنين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبي الفضل العباس واخته زينب جميعا، ورحمة الله وبركاته. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات، رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مسبوقة بصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.